الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
قل أعوذ برب الناس.
Today we are going to talk about Deuteronomy 18:18. Now let me show you the problem with Deuteronomy 18:18. In fact, it's one of my Muslim friends' favorite passage that they always use to convince anyone that Muhammad actually is the one prophesied here. So, for instance, if we go to the passage, you are going to notice the following. They're going to tell you, look, the word brothers here. These brothers are no other than Isaac and Ishmael. Look, the word God is saying, I will put my words in his mouth. Didn't God send Gabriel to recite the Quran directly to Muhammad? And the list goes on and on and on from there. Obviously, I wanted to tackle this not just by myself, but I brought two of the super weapons when it comes to Islamic apologetics.
Super weapons.
David Wood and Sam Shamoun.
Yep.
Guys, you've heard this many times.
Oh yeah, and if you watch lectures by Muslim apologists, Zakir Naik will go on for an hour trying to show how this prophecy was fulfilled about Muhammad. I will raise up for them a prophet like you. God is talking to Moses here. A prophet like you, like Moses. And so Naik will spend large amounts of time going through ways that Muhammad is like Moses. Muhammad is like Moses. Look, I mean, think about this. They're both prophets, but simultaneously military leaders, right? Most prophets aren't military leaders. And so you see these comparisons, and he'll go through all these different aspects of the life of Muhammad and find a parallel in the life of Moses to show that Muhammad is indeed the prophet who was like Moses, and therefore the fulfillment of this prophecy, and therefore Islam is true.
So as you can see, as David Wood said, that there are similarities between Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Prophet Musa ﷺ. And even the Quran witnesses that. It says in chapter 73 of the Quran, verse 15, indeed we have sent to you a messenger as a witness upon you, just as we sent to Pharaoh a messenger. Right? Inna arsalna ilaykum rasulan shahidan alaykum kama arsalna ila fir'auna rasula. So we have sent to you a messenger, all people, right? Meaning the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as a witness upon you, just as we have sent to Pharaoh a messenger. And the messenger for Pharaoh was Moses. So you can see the similarities. This ayah, this verse shows the similarities, that just same thing as we have sent to Moses a messenger, we have sent to you a messenger, meaning that there is similarity between Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Musa ﷺ, and we'll get into more details throughout the video.
What we need to first note is why God is making this promise of raising up a prophet like Moses. Let's read Deuteronomy 18:15-16 carefully. Deuteronomy 18:15-16. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet from the midst of you. The midst of who? The Ishmaelites or the Israelites?
The Israelites.
From their own midst, okay? Of your brothers like me. You must listen to him. This is according to all that you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb on the day of assembly, saying. Now here's the key. Why is God going to raise up prophets after Moses for Israel? Because this is what they asked of Moses to ask God. This is what Israel said. Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire anymore, so that I do not die. If you go back to Exodus 19 and Exodus 20, you'll note that God appeared in a cloud and they heard the voice. The voice was so terrifying, so traumatic for the Israelites, that they begged Moses, you speak to us, don't let God speak to us anymore. And God then says in 17, the Lord said to me, they have done well in what they have said. And then 18, I will raise up a prophet from among their brothers like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I've commanded. So what's the point? Instead of me appearing visibly in a cloud, and instead of them hearing my voice audibly, from now on, I'm going to raise up a prophet like you, Moses, to speak on my behalf to them, so they don't have to hear from me directly.
So now we need to understand that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent for all mankind, right? You know, the Prophet Muhammad was sent for all mankind. Unlike Jesus, in the Bible it says, Jesus said that I was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel, meaning that Jesus was only sent to these particular people, the Israelites, not all humankind, right? So if you can see in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 15, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet, meaning unto you a prophet. He will raise unto you a prophet from the midst of you. And so, as we said again, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent for the pagans of Quraysh, was sent for the Jews of Medina, right? He was sent for all mankind. So the Jews of Medina have Israelite, Israelite bloodline, right? They are from the children of Israel. And the Quran always mentions them and says, "Ya Bani Israel," meaning the Jews of Medina. So, of thy brethren, meaning from among your brothers, like unto me, unto him you shall hearken. If we go to verse 18, sorry, let me go back here. If we go to verse 18, so Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18, right? We can clearly see in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18, God said, "I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren," meaning from among their brothers, "like unto you, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command them." And that's clearly mentioning the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from among their brethrens. Brethrens meaning the Ishmaelites. And I will show you from the Bible that this is proof for it. So as you can see, if we go to Numbers chapter 20 verse 14, right? In Numbers 20 verse 14, it mentions children of Esau are described as the brethren of the children of Ismail, right? Esau is the son of Isaac and his brother is Jacob. So as you can see, this is the verse here is mentioning in Numbers chapter 20 verse 14, Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom saying, "This is what your brother Israel says." So Moses is saying to the descendants of Esau, the children of Esau, and I'll spell it for you, Esau. Esau was the brother of Jacob. So as we know, Prophet Jacob was called Israel, right? And his children were called the children of Israel, meaning the children of Jacob. Now, it mentions that this is what your brother Israel says. So this is what your brother, O children of Esau, Israel says. Since Esau is the brother of Israel, this is similar, going back here, that it can mean that God will raise from among the Israelites, right? From their brothers, meaning from among the descendants of Isaac, he will send a prophet from their brethren, meaning the brother of Isaac, meaning Ishmael, right? Just as we have saw in Numbers chapter 20 verse 14, that Moses says, "This is what your brother Israel says." He's saying to the people of, sent messengers to the children of Esau, and again Esau is the brother of Jacob, right? So he said, "This is what your brother Israel says." So he's saying to the descendants of Esau that this is what your brother Israel says, right? So if we go back here, this is what it is meant by the brethren, okay, as we have said, because it means brethren, it means from the children of Ishmael, right? So let's continue the video.
So God's talking to Moses and says, "I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him." Next verse, Deuteronomy 18 verse 20. "But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak." In other words, if a prophet delivers a revelation, says, "I have a revelation," and that revelation didn't actually come from God,
Right.
Watch this. "The prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods," someone who promotes polytheism, "that same prophet shall die." That same prophet shall die. So here we have two criteria of someone who is guaranteed to be a false prophet. We're told what it means to be like Moses. We have certain criteria of someone who's going to be like Moses. But we also have criteria of a false prophet. Here's how you know this is not the guy. that this is not the guy I'm referring to. We have two criteria. If you deliver a revelation that didn't actually come from God, or you speak in the names of other gods, you promote polytheism. Why is this interesting? Well, because Muhammad did both. Muhammad meets both of these criteria of a false prophet who is guaranteed not to be the true prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18. How did this happen? Well, he did both of them with one incident in history. Let me go ahead and read a Muslim source. And there are lots of Muslim sources on this. In fact, remember I used to say that there were, I had 30-some sources on the satanic verses?
Exactly.
That number is now up to 50. I now have 50 Muslim sources on the story of the satanic verses.
Now, first of all, David Wood speaks about, brings again the topic about the satanic verses, which we have already refuted, and we said that the sources that say that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ uttered the satanic verses are all fabricated sources, and they are proven to be fabrication and weak sources, and they are not strong sources. And as we saw before, that let's go with the criteria of David Wood. Let's say, let's say for example these are correct sources, okay, but they are not correct sources. Now I'm going to repeat again that these satanic verses are not true. The Prophet never uttered. It's only when the Prophet desired was uttering, and he was going in the Quran to the next verse, for example, and then this shaitan placed on his tongue these words, right, confused him between the revelation of Allah and between the revelation from Satan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogates the inspiration of Satan immediately before the Prophet utters it, and instead he sends back the verse, right, to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ does not utter these words, right? So it's basically, for example, if the Prophet was going to say what came to his mind, right, he would not say it, because Allah would immediately take that thought away from Satan, from his mind, abrogate it, and bring the correct verse down. Now let's just say, for example, for the sake of argument, let's say David Wood he goes with this criteria. This verse in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 20, it says, "But the prophet which shall presume means dares," right? It can mean dare, and we have seen other verses in the Bible. For example, if we go to let's check the the rest of the translation of the Bible say dares, right? So here it says, "But any prophet who dares to say something in my name that I did not command him to say, or who speaks in the name of other gods, must die." Now, first of all, if David Wood wants to say that this is what the weak sources of the satanic verses say, and let's say David Wood tries to argue that no, these are authentic sources, okay. In these weak sources of the satanic verses, it says that the Prophet accidentally spoke something because he was confused. He accidentally spoke. While here it says dares. What does dare mean? If a Prophet dares, if you dare to do it. So if the Prophet intentionally does it, right? If the Prophet, for example, knows the satanic verse and he intentionally speaks it, right? If he intentionally speaks it, then he should be dead. He's a false prophet, right? But according to these weak sources that David was using, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not do it intentionally. He did not dare. He was confused between which was from Allah and which was from Satan. So Allah immediately abrogates that, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ makes that mistake. And according to these weak sources, that when Allah abrogated these satanic verses, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ spoke again about the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after these verses were abrogated, and he made it clear to the people that this what I've spoke before are fabrications. They came from Satan. So this proves that the Prophet did not do it intentionally. He did not dare to do that. So this verse even still proves that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is a true prophet from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not dare to speak anything that goes against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not do it intentionally. According to these sources David was using, the Prophet did not do it intentionally. He did it accidentally, and he made it clear afterwards these were verses that confused me, and these were from Satan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogated them, and he brought the correct ones. Okay, so even if we assume that according to these weak sources, and these again are weak sources that David is using. In chapter 22 verse 52 it says, whenever we sent a messenger or a prophet before you, O Muhammad, and he recited our revelations, Satan would influence people's understanding of his recitation, but eventually Allah would eliminate Satan's influence. Then Allah would firmly establish his revelations. Allah is all wise, and Allah is saying that this didn't only happen with the Prophet ﷺ, this happened with the prophets before him. Now, according to David Wood, using these weak sources, is that all these prophets before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Moses, Jesus, are all false according to him, because they intentionally dared to utter these verses, which is not true. And as I repeat again, the correct sources is that according to this, إِذَا تَمَنَّى, tamanna usually doesn't mean when he recited. Tamanna's meaning is when he desired to recite something. So he did not he's thinking to recite it, but he waits, right, until Allah makes it clear to him, right? When Allah is revealing these revelations down, the Prophet is reciting them. So when the Prophet comes to a stop to go to the next verse, Allah would eliminate what Satan has revealed to him in his mind, that thought, and he would put the correct thought in his mind, so he'd recite the good thought. He would not utter the thoughts of the thoughts of Satan, for example. So this is what exactly it means. Now, afterwards, I'm going to show you more about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, why he is the Prophet, and why, for example, he was. Now, according to David Wood, Aaron was also a prophet, right? So, would Aaron be satanic if he commands the people other what God commands them? Because Aaron, according to his Bible, commanded people, allowed them to worship the calf, right? He was the one who fashioned a calf, the golden calf. According to the Quran, it was the Samiri. According to the Bible, it was Aaron who made the golden calf for the people to worship, right? In Exodus chapter 32, it says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. And for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. Aaron answered them, take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterwards they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry, right? So as you have seen, this is what the Bible says, that according to that Aaron did something satanic. He built for them a calf and enticed them to worship that calf, and according to them, Aaron was a prophet, and he commanded them to, worship that calf. So now this is proof that according to the Bible, these are the satanic verses of the Bible that came to their prophet. So if they're going to argue like that, to speak in the name of another God, right? Aaron was a prophet who spoke in the name of another God, which proves he's a false prophet. And according to Christians, he's a true prophet, right? So this is what he failed to understand. Now, if we go to Isaiah chapter 42, verse 1 to 6, here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, meaning I'll put my words onto him. This is referring to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Allah will put the words in the mouth of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he will bring justice to the nations, which the Prophet did. And pay attention to this: he will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. So that Prophet will not shout and will not raise his voice in the street. Is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? Let's go to the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. Narrated Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. This verse, verily we have sent you, O Muhammad, as a witness, as a bringer of glad tidings, and as a warner, which is in the Quran, appears in the Torah thus: verily we have sent you, O Muhammad, as a witness as a bringer of glad tidings, and as a warner, and as a protector for the illiterates, meaning the Arabs. You are my slave and my apostle, and I have named you mutawakkil, one who depends upon Allah. You are neither hard-hearted, nor of fierce character, nor one who shouts in the markets. What does the verse say here? That the Prophet that Allah will send, that servant, he will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. What does the hadith say? He is neither hard-hearted nor a fierce character, nor one who shouts in the markets. You do not return evil for evil, but excuse and forgive. Allah will not take you unto Him until He guides through you a crooked, curved nation on the right path by causing them to say, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. With such a statement, He will cause to open blind eyes, deaf ears, and hardened hearts. Let's go back to this. So it says here, I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. Gentiles referring to the illiterates, right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Gentiles in the Arabic version of the Bible is al-umam or ummi, right? So it means the illiterate people. We also see in the book of Habakkuk in chapter 3 verse 5, plague went before him, pestilence followed his steps, right? This is also mentioned of the attributes of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Bukhari and Muslim. Aisha said, when God's messenger came to Medina, Abu Bakr and Bilal were prostrated with fever, meaning fever, this was type of epidemic or plague. And when I went to God's messenger and told him, he said, "O God, make Medina as dear to us as Mecca, or more so, make it healthy," meaning remove this plague, this disease from Medina. Bless us in its sa' and its mud, and transfer its fever and put it in al-Juhfa. So the fever was in Medina when the Prophet, when the Prophet came to it, he asked Allah to remove it from Medina. So as you can see, plague went before him, pestilence followed his steps. We also see in Genesis chapter 49 verse 10, the scepter, meaning the kingdom, will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff. The ruler is here the Sharia, from between his feet, right? Until he whom it belongs to shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. Until he whom it belongs, meaning the peace bringer, meaning the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it means shalom. Shalom means the peace bringer, right? And as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, since he's the peace bringer and he's the one who has the final sharia, the final rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or final law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in this sharia it is easy for the Jews and Christians, like it says in chapter 7 157, those who follow the messenger, the illiterate prophet whom they find written in what they have of the Torah and the gospel, who enjoins upon them what is right and forbids them from what is wrong, and makes lawful to them what is good and forbids them from what is evil, and relieves them of their burden and the shackles that were upon them, right? So this is also a proof. And we have also proof in chapter in Matthew. I think this is the one, but I don't know why it's so here in Matthew chapter 21 verse 43, therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who produce its fruits, meaning the rule will be taken away from the Israelites and will be given to those who produce fruits like the Prophet Muhammad and his people, who the final law, the religion of Islam, and basically was completed at the time Prophet Muhammad, who was the final prophet, was after Jesus and after many generations, and they were given the rule. They ruled Egypt. Islam reached Egypt. Islam reached the Levant lands, Persia, Pakistan, India, Turkey, Constantinople, and as it says in the Bible also as well in Daniel, when Daniel saw a vision, Prophet Daniel, in the Bible, in Daniel chapter 18 verse 7, it says that the kingdom of Constantinople, it will be given, these people will take it forever, meaning the Muslims, right? The kingdom of Constantinople is forever, will be for the Muslims, right? And as it says here, that some people will take the kingdom of Constantinople and it'll be theirs forever. And this proves that the Muslims right now rule Constantinople and they have taken it forever, right? And the majority in Turkey are Muslims as well, as we know, and Islam reached it and it stayed with them forever, as it says. So this is also proof of that. Also, to end it off with the final prophecy of Matthew chapter 21 verse 2, Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures, the stones the builders rejected has become the cornerstone?" Now, who is the cornerstone? It is again Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because if we go to Sahih Muslim right here, Abu Hurairah reported Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as saying, "The similitude of mine and that of the apostles before me is that of a person who built a house quite imposing and beautiful, and he made it complete but for one brick in one of its corners. People began to walk around it, and the building pleased them, and they would say, 'But for this brick your building would have been perfect.' Muhammad ﷺ said, 'I am that final brick.'" So the Prophet ﷺ is that cornerstone and the final brick and the final Prophet Muhammad ﷺ.